So now you know how to draw shapes and outline them, and you even know how to draw them loose. Now, how do you add the shades, the lights and darks, or if you were to use a more academic term, the tonal values? And that's what baffled me for years. Now in school they taught us how to do the chiaroscuro, how do you say that? Chiaroscuro thing where they taught me how to shade a sphere, to shade the darkest part, add the midtones, where to put the highlights, where to put the shadows. And this is to make an object look 3D. And they taught me also how to shade these little boxes from dark to light. And I could do this with no problem. But when I was around 15 or 16 years old and I would do these imaginary drawings like this city scene, I would try to shade them after outlining them. And I felt like I didn't know what I was doing. Like, should I shade all these 100 little details, all the dark parts, the mid-tones and the highlights for every single object in this scene? And even when I did that, I didn't know what I was trying to aim for. And so you'll find that in my early sketchbooks, I basically tried to avoid drawing backgrounds, especially complicated backgrounds altogether, because I didn't know how to shade them. So it was several years later when I was in this phase where I would buy lots of art books and I would study them and try to figure out what makes these fantastic artworks work. And I was flipping through this book by Christian Schellewald, and I was looking through all his sketches. Some of his sketches just had simple pen lines or just simple pencil lines, and no matter how simple his drawings were, they always worked. As in, it always looked comfortable to my eye and I always knew where to look. It's pretty much clear storytelling. So I was wondering, how does he do that? I thought maybe it's the pen he uses or the way he hatches. And then I realized something. In his sketches, he'll basically just use 3 or 4 tonal values: a dark black, 1 or 2 midtones, and white paper. And that was true for his colored drawings too, if you imagine everything in black and white. And so I learned that to make a drawing work, I didn't always need to use the full range of tonal values. To keep it simple, I could just use 3 or 4 tonal values. But what I found more interesting was that my eyes were always drawn to where his dark blacks met his whites. And that always coincided with the area I thought to be the most interesting part of the picture. And that's where something clicked for me. And I'll sum it up in this principle that I put together for myself. Number 1, the more contrast an area has, the more attraction power it will have for the eye. And the highest contrast we can have is where black meets white, the opposite ends of the spectrum. So if we had that next to an area of lower contrast or pretty much no contrast, the eye will be attracted more to the high contrast area. In terms of attraction power, high contrast is like a powerful magnet, and weaker contrasts are like weaker magnets. With this, I can control where people look on the screen or on the page. So as I continued looking at his pictures, I noticed one other thing. Both these areas had high contrast, but my eye would look here, and then here, and then back here again. Like my eye would still be most attracted to this area. So I penned down another principle. Bigger areas of contrast have more attraction power than smaller areas of contrast. So if I have this area of high contrast, the eye will look here. But if I added a bigger area of high contrast, like more quantities of it, the eye will be drawn to the bigger area. It's like having 2 powerful magnets, one in a small size and one in a giant size. And the giant size one will be more powerful. And that made sense to me, because I also noticed that a black line on white paper is essentially high contrast in a small area. So a thicker black line will attract my eye more than a thinner line, or a broken black line. I also noticed this principle in everyday things like books. Like, why make the chapter headings bigger and bolder? And why give more space around them? This principle allows us to control what people see first, second, and so forth by controlling the size and the contrast of things. And perhaps it also answers why women put mascara and thicker eyelashes and sometimes even find a way to make their pupils look bigger, more attraction power. But this principle will also mean that a bigger area of low contrast will stand out more than a tiny, high contrast area. I'll look at this bigger area first, then the small part, and then back again. Let's see how Shallow Wild does it. So here, this giant mid-tone area against the white sky draws my attention first, and then I notice these small areas of high contrast. But then my eyes keep getting pulled back to this giant area of low contrast. Interesting. And so with these two principles, in my own words, that's how I approach and troubleshoot pretty much all of my drawings. And so far it's working pretty well. So going back to this drawing, if I want to make your eye attracted to the car, which is the main subject matter, I'll do this. I'll put a decent amount of high contrast, black meets white, within the car and around the car. So the area where the car is will have the highest contrast within the picture, and your eye will be attracted to that part. So if I want to keep it minimal, like just a line drawing, I can just keep it like this. But if I wanted to add more midtones and colors, I would add more midtones around here, but I would pay careful attention not to cover up the white so that there's enough white next to the black within this area of the car. So this is the Sherlock Sam children's series that I draw for by Epigram Books. And so let's look at this busy Japan scene. So for this city scene, I wanted to make sure the reader focuses on the main characters here. So I gave this area the biggest amount of high contrast, which is black next to white, black next to white, black next to white, black next to white. For the surrounding areas, I kept it to a minimal quantities of high contrast and mostly low contrast, black next to a midtone, black next to a midtone, black next to a midtone. And for this illustration, I had 2 points of focus. I wanted people to focus here first, so I put high amounts of contrast here. You can see the blacks of the tree next to the sky, the black bar here next to the sky, a lot of it because this was an important area where you can see these words here. And then after that, I wanted the reader to look here. So I gave the face and the uniform high contrast here. So people will look here and then towards the smaller proportion of high contrast here. So I hope this video gives you more clarity on how to add tonal values to your illustrations or sketches. These two principles really made a big difference for me, so I hope they will be helpful to you. And thank you for watching.